An unfortunate reality is that, as a Canadian, or more broadly a Westerner I guess, I don't know much about what's going on football-wise in Asia, which I think can be said for many people outside of Asia. So, Asia's most passionate derby and the longest running top-flight derby in Asian history seemed like a logical place to start. Of course, I'm talking about the Kolkata Derby, Mohun Bagan versus East Bengal. Hey, I'm Adrian and welcome to Rabona TV's Roots of the Rivalry. Now, if you're new to the series, what we do here is basically look at the initial point in which two teams were at odds, the earliest reasons as to why there's discontent between them, and supplement that with a few other notable instances from throughout their shared history that only contributed to said discontent between them. Remember, I won't be able to cover the entire shared history, so not every single conflict and detail will be covered here. Oh, and it goes without saying, I'm going to be trying my absolute best to get the pronunciation of names and places correct, but if things are sounding a little bit off, please be forgiving. I don't mean to offend, I'm trying my best here. Alright, let's get things started off with Mohun Bagan first, and their foundational history. While the Indian independence movement was starting to take some shape in the 1800s, football fans in Bengal, an eastern province within India, created their own football club in 1889, the driving force behind it being a local lawyer named Bhupendranath Basu. However, there were actually three families that helped with the founding of Mohun Bagan Sporting Club: the aforementioned Basu family, the Sen family, and the Mitra family. By the way, with its founding in August of 1889, that makes Mohun Bagan the oldest club in India's football history, and in 1989, the year of the club's centenary, the Mariners, as they're affectionately known as, were given the title of the National Club of India by the Indian Prime Minister. Fast forward to the year 1900 and Mohun Bagan had a revolutionary signing in their new secretary of the club, Subadar Major Sailen Basu, who was the highest-ranking Indian officer of the 49th Bengal Regiment. Given his military background, he put more of a focus on the physical condition of the players at the club, and 4 years later in 1904, it paid dividends, with Mohun Bagan winning their first ever trophy, the Kush Bahar Cup. A year later in 1905, they did the double by retaining the Kush Bahar Cup and taking the Gladstone Cup as well. Their most historic title win, or at least one of the first most historic cups that Mohun Bagan won, was of course the Indian Football Association Shield, or the IFA Shield. Prior to Mohun Bagan's inclusion in the IFA Shield tournament in 1909, the Shield was only contested by British regiment teams. Colonialism. So it was a big deal that 4 teams comprised of Indian players were included in the tournament in 1909. Well, in the 1911 edition of the tournament, Mohun Bagan made it all the way to the final of the IFA Shield against East Yorkshire Regiment. In a tight 2-1 victory, Mohun Bagan scored the winner with just 2 minutes remaining as they became the first Indian side to win the IFA Shield, doing it barefoot against the Brits. And I think that's a great place to leave things as far as Mohun Bagan's foundational history. I'll come back to just how massively important that 1911 victory was, not only for the club, but for the country as well. Alright, let's move on to East Bengal FC, who were born out of a disagreement, like many great teams before them. On July 28, 1920, Mohun Bagan was set to face Jora Bagan in the Kush Bahar Cup. However, due to some fishy circumstances, Jora Bagan's star player Sailesh Bose wasn't included in the lineup, which incensed Jora Bagan's vice president Suresh Chandra Chowdhury, who pleaded that Bose be included in the lineup. His wishes were ignored, Bose didn't feature in the match, and Chowdhury severed all ties with Jora Bagan immediately. A few days later, on August 1st, 1920, Chowdhury and a few other former members of Jora Bagan lay the foundations for a new club, which they called East Bengal. This, of course, due to the fact that the founding members were all from East Bengal, which is present-day Bangladesh. You'll want to remember this detail, by the way, for later in the video as well, as it's a major contributing factor to the rivalry between these two clubs. But we'll get to that after the foundational history. So anyways, East Bengal competed in their first ever tournament within the same month of their founding, August of 1920, taking part in a 7-a-side tournament called the Hercules Cup, which they were victorious in. Now, it was previously believed that East Bengal and Mohun Bagan first met in May of 1925, but in 2016, it was discovered via archived newspaper reports that they faced each other for the first time ever on August 8th, 1921 in the semi-finals of the Kush Bahar Cup. The first match ended 0-0, while the replay saw Mohun Bagan come out on top 3-0. In 1922, following East Bengal's inclusion into the IFA, which was strongly contested by Mohun Bagan and Aryans, the two deeply intertwined histories of these two clubs became even more so, as Mohun Bagan and East Bengal shared the same home ground, despite protest once again from Mohun Bagan. Jumping ahead to 1924, and East Bengal were the joint winners of the second division, but due to the fact that the team they were tied with were the reserves of a first division team, promotion fell to East Bengal. However, the British rule of the IFA stated that only 2 Indian teams were permitted in the top flight at a time. A massive push was made to abolish this rule, and East Bengal got the promotion they had earned, finding their way into the same league as their rivals, Mohun Bagan. Alright, so there's the very, very brief early histories of the two clubs, so now let's look at what divides them. To put it simply, this division goes far beyond sport and has roots in the cultural identities of the two sets of supporters, and will require some quick history to understand it. I know myself, I'm not Geography Now or History Buffs on YouTube, but bear with me. The Indian state of Bengal was divided into East Bengal and West Bengal in 1905, causing uproar and some radical nationalism directed towards the British amongst certain sects in both Bengal states, with some even lashing out violently. It also led to refugees moving from East to West Bengal and West to East, with many Eastern Bengals, which is current-day Bangladesh, moving to what was the capital of India until 1911, Kolkata. Contributing to this immigration further was the partition of British India and the Pakistan movement in 1947 that led to the creation of the Dominion of Pakistan, and on the eastern side of India, the Bengal state was split up as well. West Bengal, a predominantly Hindu region, was to stay part of India, while East Bengal, a predominantly Muslim region, joined the Dominion of Pakistan. Eventually, however, via the Bangladesh Liberation War of 1971, Bangladesh, then officially known as East Pakistan, would separate from Pakistan, getting their independence. But back to 1947, when the partition of India occurred, this created a refugee crisis where again Hindus from East Bengal moved to West Bengal in India, and the Muslims from West Bengal in India moved to East Bengal, the old population swap. While researching this derby, the most common comparison made between the Kolkata Derby and a European derby would be that of the Old Firm, Rangers versus Celtic. In fact, it may be helpful to keep this in mind. If we were to apply the Old Firm dichotomy to this derby, then Mohun Bagan would be like Rangers, or the native group of people within Kolkata, while the East Bengal supporters would be like Celtic, in that they represent the immigrant Bangladeshi or East Bengal population within Kolkata, much like Celtic represent the immigrant Irish in Glasgow. As always, this isn't a rigid rule, as there are of course exceptions always, but in most cases, supporters of East Bengal are of Bangladeshi origin, while the Mohun Bagan supporters are typically the native Indians. Now there's also the sporting aspect, in which these two match the off-field cultural competitiveness with an intense feeling of one-upmanship in regards to on-field success that all derbies necessitate. The thing about this matchup in particular in India is that the state of Bengal is one of, if not the most, football-mad area of India, though special mention goes to Kerala and Goa as well, as I read they love their football there. But the more I looked into it, the more that I saw that the state of Bengal seems to be a bit of an outlier in that cricket isn't the number one sport in the state, and that the people there are as crazy for football as you would see in any football capital of the world, like Buenos Aires or Rio or Istanbul or whatever. So why is it that they sort of run against the cultural norm of India, if you will? Well, a huge part of that has got to be down to the fact that people from this state were responsible for becoming the first Indian team to ever beat the colonists, during a time in which there was total chaos and upheaval on the long and bumpy road to independence. From that day forward, football became so important for the citizens of Bengal, reminding them of when they got one over on their oppressors, with this instance in particular said by some to be a catalyst in the Indian freedom movement. Take that passion for the sport and apply it to a local rivalry that already has a massive cultural divide. Add in that one of the teams is representative of the Bangladeshi immigrants within India, while the other was titled the National Club of India by the Prime Minister. Add to that the fact that despite having fewer trophies than Mohun Bagan, East Bengal has 128 Kolkata Derby wins to Mohun Bagan's 118. That's including all matches, friendly or otherwise. One of the biggest, most electrifying matches in the history of these two clubs came in 1997, where an Asian record attendance of 131,000 people attended the Federation Cup semi-final, which holds a similar prestige to that of the FA Cup, or what it used to in England. East Bengal won that match 4-1 and moved on to the finals thanks to a hat-trick from Baichung Bhutia. Though they lost the final 2-1, they'll forever have that historic notch on their belt. Now, it may not be played in front of as many people during every iteration of the derby, but it is impossible to get rid of that passion and explosiveness that is ever present during the Kolkata Derby. It's in the blood of the supporters to be at odds with each other. But as much as they are at each other's throats, these teams would never have achieved the heights they have without the other existing. Alright, that's it for this edition of Roots of the Rivalry, the first Asian edition of the series. I had a lot of fun watching videos and mini documentaries on the rivalry, reading tons of articles, the history of the clubs, the history of India to some extent, and so much more. So I'm happy to share what I learned. And hey, if you appreciated it, then do me a favor and hit that like button. A subscription is always welcome too, don't be shy. But, alright. I'm Adrian, thanks so much for watching. This has been a long goodbye and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace!